Hey, Bruce Naylor, and welcome to the Frugal Tech channel. This channel, we talk about different tech and techniques to help you create better YouTube videos. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about 5 tips to get better quality color in your videos. Okay, for the first tip, let's talk about the display you're using in order to edit your video. If you're not getting accurate color out of that display, then obviously you're not going to produce videos with great color. Now, what I recommend is getting a monitor or having access to a monitor that at least provides 100% of the sRGB space. Now, that stands for your standard red, green, and blue color space. And this is the language, if you will, of the web, the color of the web. That's what web browsers and etc. use. And that's what people are going to watch YouTube videos on. After all, if you can't tell accurate color, then your video is going to just not look right. The next thing that you want to do, if you can afford it, is to get a calibration tool. Now, this is the Spider 5 Express. They're about 130 bucks on Amazon. Link down below. This is not pro quality, but it really does get you quite close to the most accurate representation of color you can get. I highly recommend one of these because you will calibrate your monitor and create a color profile that, whether you're using Windows or using Mac OS X, is going to get you very, very close. Tip number 2, and that is to really nail your exposure. And as a YouTuber, if you're doing talking head videos like I am, vlogging, etc., where you're doing people, you want to learn to accurately expose for skin tones. Now, there's a scale called IRE in your editors, and 0 being totally black, your shadows, and 100 being white. You want to have those skin tones somewhere between 60 and 70, and that'll give you a great starting place for getting great color for the rest of your image. And of course, your people will look really good. Their skin tones will look more natural. Okay, tip number 3, and this is probably going to be the most important area, and that is, let's talk about white balance. Now, I'm shooting on a Canon 70E. I have a Sony AX100, AX53, Canon T6i, and they all allow for you to custom white balance your camera. Many people, when they get started, run their cameras in full auto. And when they do that, they're using what's called auto white balance. And it's gotten a lot better over the years, especially I think it works better when you're outside in daylight than it does in artificial lighting. Now, most of my videos are done inside an office with very little light, so I have to use various light sources. Okay, so talking about custom white balance, I like to use what's called Kelvin, and that is the temperature you light. You see, light sources, whether it's a tungsten light, which is those old yellowish light bulbs, fluorescent lights, which are those white bulbs, daylight bulbs, etc., they all have different color temperatures. Now, I have found an app on the App Store for iOS, and I believe it's available for Android, and it is called Light Spectrum Pro. It's only a few dollars, and basically as you look at the app, as you use your camera, it will give you an overall reading of the color temperature of the light in your room. Avoid using mixed lighting sources whenever possible, but if you can't, then this is certainly an app that you're definitely going to want to use. And I set my camera, now right now, I'm getting a reading right now of about 4,800 degrees Kelvin, which is not quite as blue as outside light. You see, warmer light starts around about 3,200 degrees Kelvin and goes up to 5,600, 7,000 degrees Kelvin. And I'm recording this right now. I've got this camera set to 5,000 degrees Kelvin. You probably may not have that option in a consumer grade camera. So the next best option, if you can't use something like this light meter app and use Kelvin on your camera, is to use what's called a gray card. And right here it is. And you can get these for under 10 bucks on Amazon. There's a white side, there's a gray side. I typically use this, the gray side, in order to manually white balance my camera. And with the Canon, you just simply take a photo. You zoom in on the image of the white card, you snap a picture of this, and then you tell the camera to use that photo as the reference for the white balance. And it's going to get you pretty good. What I don't recommend is using auto white balance whenever possible. Unless you're outside, then I think it works pretty well. But if you're in a room with different light sources, auto white balance can get confused. Your images, your video can just come out where things look kind of green or kind of red or kind of yellow. And that's because the color temperature just simply isn't right. So at least always custom white balance for your shot. Use a white card if you can take a custom white balance, or if you can use Kelvin, use an app like this, the Light Spectrum Pro, and I think you're going to find that you're going to get really good color in your white balance by using this application. Tip number 4, and this is kind of subjective. It depends on the camera that you got. If you shoot Canon, Sony, others, they have what's called color profiles, and many people will recommend that you shoot in what's called log, which is a flat profile. And then you can do all your fiddling in your editor. You can also use like the standard profile in Canon. I'm sure that Sony and so forth's got their own type of standard, or neutral. I tend to shoot a lot in neutral, or if I'm going to do some color grading in post, then I'll shoot in what's called cinematone. The Canon 70D, for example, does not have a true log profile. But the idea is to try to shoot as flat as you can, and that way you're avoiding oversaturated colors and too much contrast, and you're capturing a little bit more detail in that image that you can work with in your editor. However, there's certainly nothing wrong with getting started using auto mode, standard mode, or neutral if you don't want to really delve into that. You're still going to get great color, especially if you get that lighting right, that white balance right, and that exposure right. Tip number 5. And this is, don't trust your eyes. Even if you have a calibrated monitor and the colors are maybe slightly off for whatever reason, and you're staring at that image on the screen, I think after a while your mind and eyes begin to play tricks going, yeah, I think that looks okay. It's just like a pilot. There's 2 types of licenses, right? There's one called IFR or VFR, which is Visual Flight Rule, and that's when you only fly in good weather. But then there's the IFR rating, and that's the one that allows you to fly in bad weather, nighttime, etc. And pilots learn to trust their instruments and not their eyes, because they know their eyes can deceive them. The same thing with color. Your eyes can deceive you. Trust your instruments, and that is learning to use the scopes in your editor. Now, if you have an inexpensive video editor, they may not have scopes. I recommend, if you're serious about getting good color, at least get a editor that does have the scopes. And a good free one is going to be DaVinci Resolve. I think they're up to 15.1, absolutely free. And it's the editor many colorists use professionally to work with color. And it's got fantastic scopes. And you'll learn to use things like the histogram, or in Final Cut Pro uses what's called a waveform monitor, and that way you can see where you're at on whether you're overexposed, underexposed, etc. An RGB parade that helps you figure out, do I have too much red in the highlights, not enough green in the midtones, etc. Learn to trust the scopes in order to get you good color. Now, there's a difference between color correction and color grading. And when I got started making YouTube videos, I ended up watching lots and lots of videos, spending more time on color grading, which is kind of just a look to a video. Maybe you want it to look warm or golden, or, of course, everybody's shooting movies now in this orange and teal color grade, but color correction is making sure exposure is right, making sure that there's not too much blue or too much red or whatever in the image, making the image look as accurate as you can. And spend time learning those tools in your editor. So if you have a monitor capable displaying sRGB, 100%, you've exposed properly, you've white balanced to the light sources that you have, especially color temperature. If you can do that, even better, because I just think Kelvin, setting it for Kelvin is the best form of white balancing. Or then using custom white balance by snapping a photo or something like that is your second best. Definitely stay away from the auto white balance whenever possible. Do that, learning to use your scopes in your editor, and of course, shooting in the right color profile that gets the most accurate colors out of your camera cam, because I think it's really, really important at the end of the day to get as much correct in camera rather than depending on trying to fix it in post. And those are my 5 tips to get better color in your YouTube videos. I look forward to hearing from you in the comments down below. I'm Bruce Naylor. Until the next one.